1979. Hey guys, welcome to Amity Tracks. 79, man. What a year. What a huge year. I was pulling off all these records off the shelf. My God, massive amounts of great stuff put out in 79. Kind of like 77, 78. The transition, the big changes in music continue in this year. The end of the 70s, the end of that decade. It's a lot of stuff, a lot of stuff. Before we get started here, please do subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out. We thank everyone who's already subscribed. It just really helps us do what we want to do. If you subscribe, if you enjoy this material, hit the bell for notifications, like the videos, you know the drill, all the good stuff. Well, let's get into it. What was happening in 79? Well, Sid Vicious dies of a heroin overdose. Deer Hunter wins Best Picture. Pope John Paul II visits his homeland of Poland, a historic trip that many historians look at as one of the key events that really kind of kickstarts that chain of events in the 80s, leading to the fall of communism in Europe and Eastern Europe. But maybe even more important than that, McDonald's introduces the Happy Meal. Rapper's Delight, the very first charting rap single, is released. The Iran hostage crisis unfolds. Disaster at the Who concert in Cincinnati, where 11 concert goers are killed or trampled to death in a rush through the doors. And the 3 Mile Island nuclear, we'll call it a near meltdown, where we almost have our own Chernobyl. Not quite, though. Yeah, so a lot going on in 79. But let's talk music. So, I'm going to do what we did last year for the 78 video. I kind of like hitting you with the top 10 first, because it makes it a little more dramatic when everything's on the table. And then after we finish the top 10, I can hit you with a bunch of honorable mentions. But I do need to mention this record that is not in my top 10. I'll say it's in my honorable mentions. Kind of like I had to do in 79 and 77. This is sort of the point where, another one of those examples where the music I love, that I'm saying this is my personal top 10, might not line up with one of the most important records ever released, ever. And I acknowledge that. And I acknowledge this is one of the greatest records. And I actually really do like it. I do. I really do like it. But if I'm going to be honest with you, it's not in my top 10. Although, it's crazy if I was, again, if I was creating an objective, like these are the greatest, most important records ever, this would be in there. But this stuff is subjective. So yeah, I am talking about The Clash, London Calling, massive, awesome, brilliant, yes. But in my honorable mention, just for me personally, sorry. Okay, let's talk about my top 10. Now that we've got that out of the way. In my number 10 slot, I've got a guy who I think a lot of people might kind of pin as a one-hit wonder, and the hit was on this record. But this guy is really good. He's put out a lot of great music. Some of the greatest, most interesting synth pop of anybody, and that's Gary Newman. And this is the album The Pleasure Principle. Of course, it does have his huge hit Cars on there, but man, really, this whole thing, start to finish, is brilliant synth pop, brilliant concepts, hooks, melodies, brilliant use of synthesizers. And it just, yeah. Check Gary Newman out. Not a one-hit wonder. Really good. He's actually had a pretty long and varied career. All right, in my number 9 slot, is a great debut album that was released like right at the end, like the last couple of days of the year. So it does qualify as 79, although I don't know, maybe a lot of people kind of associate it more with 1980, but it was released in 79. I checked it out. It's the debut from The Pretenders. So, The Pretenders. Yeah, man. Chrissy Hine, one of the greatest female artists in rock and roll. She had everything. She could be vulnerable. She could be tough, badass. I think gorgeous. Uh, Chrissy Hine had it all. She was. I mean, she was. I mean, she's still around. Obviously, she is awesome. And this debut album just, I mean, kicked everyone in the ass when this came out. It's so great. I just rocks. But even here, they showed that they could, have kind of they could do really good sort of pop songs too, pop rock songs. Brass in Pocket, of course, covering the Kinks' "Stop Your Sobbing," which I guess impressed Ray Davis so much, as many of you probably know. Ray Davis and Chrissy Hine were married for a little while. Ray Davis of the Kinks. Yeah, just what was it? Space Invader. I think that's that instrumental, right? Space Invader was used in The Sopranos. That was cool. Yeah, this is just brilliant, start to finish. Awesome. Love the Pretenders, at least kind of early Pretenders. All right, number eight. Number eight. It's a band I love, and I've mentioned before, but I haven't talked about them too much recently. But and this is a record that I don't think is really considered by many to be one of their best, but it is one of my personal favorites of theirs. Talking about Roxy Music's Manifesto. I really dig this record. I think Manifesto is fantastic. It's they're definitely sort of in their later phase where they're the edges are kind of smoothed, and they're kind of focusing on some dance music, but it's not all dance music, but kind of dialing back on some of the art rock that was present in their earlier stuff. I mean, Brian Ferry is firmly in control here. But yeah, I think this is a great listen. It's interesting since they, you know, after their first couple of records, they didn't have a permanent bass player. They always just used session guys, kind of Steely Dan like. But the bass playing on this thing is awesome. That bass kind of outro was on Stronger Through the Years. Wow, so good. Yeah, Manifesto's a great song. Trash is cool. Trash, Angel Eyes. I really dig Manifesto. I think it's great. I think it's underrated. Again, it's not talked about, with a lot of the great Roxy Music records, but I think it is. Number seven, on the 78 list, I had their debut, so I got their second one here, Van Halen 2. And in some ways, we did a Van Halen video a while back. You can go back and watch that, but in some ways, I personally might enjoy listening to this even more than the debut. It kind of follows the same template. It's not all that different, but I do think they, they write some great sort of pop rock songs for the first time here. Was it "Dance the Night Away"? It's a killer, just radio song. It's awesome. I really like their cover on here of um, "You're No Good." The I actually don't remember who first wrote it. Linda Ronstadt had a hit with it. I really dig it. I know there are a lot of Van Halen fans who aren't huge fans of that, but no, this is, I don't know. In some ways, it's kind of like the debut. It's short, concise, just you know, punch after punch, says what it needs to say and gets out of there. But I love Van Halen too. Number six. Now, number six is definitely one of those love it, hate it records. People think it's genius, or people really think it's bloated and don't really like it. Obviously, I got it this high in a packed year. I think is genius. Fleetwood Mac's Tusk, double album, sprawling, unfocused, but I think unfocused in a great way, in the same way that, the White Album by the Beatles or Exile on Main Street by the Stones might be kind of scattered and brilliantly unfocused. Same thing here. I mean, Lindsey Buckingham, his production, his songwriting is just on. Stevie Nicks brings the goods. Christine McVie always brought the goods. And their songs are so different. Each of those three artists Stevie Nicks, Lindsey Buckingham, and Christine McVie are so different on here, and it's fascinating how they're just thrown together like that. I think Storms too is one of Stevie Nicks's like unsung gems. Storms is gorgeous. Yeah, and Lindsey Buckingham's just nervous energy. It's almost punk. I don't know, but like really refined. I don't know. Interesting stuff. You guys tell me in the comments. Some people really don't like this album. I love it. I love Tusk. Okay, and number 5. I've kind of been mentioning this guy in honorable mentions as the past couple of years, but I finally do, and this is my favorite record of his. Elvis Costello and the Attractions, Armed Forces. Actually, I prefer this cover better. I think, wasn't this sort of I don't know. I always thought this was the U.S. and this was the U.K. cover. I don't know. I guess they're both on there. I like the elephants, but yeah, I think this is. Oh, here, we'll show the elephants. This is Elvis Costello. It's the perfect kind of marriage, kind of that in between point where he kind of keeps that edge and some of that anger, but he also brings in his craft, in a great, great way. Um, Accidents Will Happen is just brilliant. Party Girl, so Beatles esque. That extended ending there. Yeah, and then the Nick Lowe cover. What's so funny about Peace, Love, and Understanding? It's one of the great tracks. I mean, every track on here I think is brilliant, and can be analyzed, you know, on its own merits as it's just a great, beautifully constructed pop song, but with an edge. With an edge. Speaking of angry young men, in my number 4 slot, I have a guy who in the early days was often kind of mentioned in the same breath as Elvis Costello. They both sort of came out of England at the same time. These critically, the critics kind of viewed them similarly. But where Elvis Costello sort of took off, this guy sort of remained kind of a cult artist. But this record is brilliant. Graham Parker, Squeezing Out Sparks. Now I'm ashamed to say I only very recently discovered this. Kind of interesting story. I used to have this book. I don't even have it anymore. I don't know where it went. Must have purged it at some point. But it was one of those books like 100 greatest rock albums. And I had it in the late 80s. So, it was published in the late 80s. So, that was the cutoff. So, you don't have anything 90s and beyond because that hadn't happened yet. So, you got to keep that in mind. So, it was as of the late 80s. This book was the 100 greatest rock albums. And they kind of usual thing. They polled a bunch of critics and DJs and stuff. It was kind of interesting. Actually, they didn't poll any musicians in that one. It was all DJs and music critics and stuff. And you look through it, all the usual suspects were there. The Beatles records and the Stones records and the Bob Dylan records and Led Zeppelin and blah 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 blah. And this was in there. I don't remember what position it was, but this was in there. And like I had heard of all pretty much every record but this, and I remember this always kind of stood out in that book. Like, well, what is that? And I don't know, for some reason I never explored it. Recently, I was in flipping through the used bins and saw this in there for under $10, and I like recognized like, yeah, God, I've always heard about that record. So I just it's one of those things. I just bought it for $7 or whatever. and was just blown away. This is amazing. God, this is start to finish. Protection was one of the big songs off of here. It's sort of big, but Discovering Japan, Local Girls. I mean, it's got edge, angry young man type of thing, but hooks galore. I it's sort of early Elvis Costello-ish, right? Because they were sort of similar early on. I think better though. I mean, this is amazing. This is amazing. Maybe you should discover it like I did. All right. Number 3 and 2, I've talked about on this channel because I've done videos on each of these bands. In fact, in my 3 slot is the video we did very recently on the Police. So I have their second record, Regata de Blanc. So yeah, I mean, we just talked about the Police on this channel. But yeah, I love this record. I'll just reiterate a few high points that when I talked about this record. I do think this is probably the best of their 5 studio records. If you want to hear Stuart Copeland's amazing drumming and percussion work, the hi hat on "Walking on the Moon" just blows me away. Regatta de Blanc, the title track, the instrumental title track, which is that rocks. And it just shows, I think, the best of each of these 3 musicians. But yeah, this is so strong. Of course, Message in a Bottle's on here, which might be their definitive rock song at least. Super strong. Number 2, we also did a video on this band, but a while back. But it's the second record. Kind of like that's the second Police record. This is the second record from The Cars, Candio. Now, aside from the lovely album art, I love this record. It's often overshadowed by that debut, which was huge. I think this is just as strong. Just the songwriting of Rick Ocasek. I mean, you can't beat it. Yeah, I mentioned this in my Cars video, but that was so long ago. Some of you guys might not have seen that. The song "Night Spots," the opener on side 2, might be my favorite Cars song. Maybe like I kind of explained this in that video. There are enough hooks in that song for like 3 hit songs, and they're just layered on top of each other. God, it's so great. Yeah, love this record, and I think it's just as good as a debut, and sort of not as overplayed. So I think it's fresher. I think it's awesome. All right, guys, my number 1 though, and this is the only time in these yearly videos I will ever do this. I do have a tie in my number 1 slot. I know it's not. I don't know if that's kosher or not, but they go together. They are companion pieces. They are by the same artist. It's hard for me to separate them. Both of these records are 2 of the most important records ever to me, like in my life and my music fandom. Neil Young and Crazy Horse, or Rust Never Sleeps, and then Live Rust. Like I said, they go together. Rust Never Sleeps, Live Rust. Rust Never Sleeps, I think, is so brilliant because it shows the 2 kind of most celebrated sides of Neil Young. The acoustic troubadour, the acoustic songwriter, the moody songwriter, and then like Crazy Horse garage rock. Side 1 is the acoustic side. Side 2 is the electric side, and just the batch of songs he brings here, and bookending it, right, opening it with the acoustic my hey hey out of the blue, and then closing it with the brutal electric hey hey my into the black. Such a great concept there. Those acoustics, man. Thrasher is beautiful. Ride My Llama is awesome. Pocahontas. I love any song that brings up Marlon Brando. I think is awesome. Right, Marlon Brando, Pocahontas, and me. Right, sitting by the fire. It's just so great. Then Powderfinger, which I think might be his greatest story, like storytelling. God, just awesome. And then, of course, the accompanying Live Rust. This, I think, this double live album, I I think this is what made me fall in love with Neil Young. And I mentioned this before. Neil Young's my favorite artist. We haven't done a Neil Young week yet, just because it's like such a colossal task. We'll do it. We'll do a Neil Young week at some point. But and this is what did it for me. This is one of the first Neil Young records I ever had, and similar to the Rust Never Sleeps, it's like half acoustic, half electric. And some of the songs are repeated from Live Rust, but then it's also like a real good overview of some of his hits. Sugar Mountain, I Am a Child, Comes a Time, After the Gold Rush, the Loners on there, Needle and the Damage Done, Powderfinger again, Cortez the Killer, Cinnamon Girl, Like a Hurricane, Tonight's the Night. I mean, the My Hey Hey and Hey Hey My My. I mean, just I mean, so powerful. This is the record. I would say more than any other record I own. This is how I learned how to play guitar. Like I learned how to play guitar learning these songs. I think come the acoustic version on here of "Comes a Time," not from the "Comes a Time" record, but from here. I think that's the first full song I ever learned how to play and sing. So yeah, I mean, this record's special to me, and really, if you're the uninitiated, I can't think of a better place to maybe start if you really want to get into great Neil Young. Is that? Well, there you go. It's my top 10. Okay, honorable mentions. I'm gonna try and make this super fast because I got a ton. I mean, I told you this was a big year. Well, we can start. I got this on CD with The Cure, right? Their debut. Now, Boys Don't Cry is the American debut. Three Imaginary Boys is the UK. Slightly different track listing. I've got the American here. You're going to hear a lot about The Cure as we get into the 80s years. Love The Cure. All right, let me pull these records. Oh, man, I got this big stack here. Like I said, rapid fire. Yeah, if I had an if my top 10 was a top 11 and 12, these two would be in my 12 and 11 slots. They barely, I mean, barely didn't make the list. Tom Petty, Damn the Torpedoes. I mean, just, I mean, just look at that first side, man. Refugee, Here Comes My Girl, Even the Losers, Shadow of a Doubt, Century City, and an open up side two with Don't Do Me Like That. I mean, yeah, awesome, awesome, awesome. The other one that almost made my list here would be Van Morrison's Into the Music. Yeah, if you're not familiar with this is great. Kind of later Van Morrison, relatively later. I mean, he's still putting out stuff. Yeah, and he was kind of discovering a bit of his spirituality during this period. Bright Side of the Road, Full Force Gale, very spiritual songs, but great. The song "And the Healing Has Begun" is one of those extended, just where Van Morrison takes you to a place no other artist can take you to, just emotionally, and that's just, man, it's a stunning song. Great Van Morrison record. All right, real fast. Yeah, I'm a fan of this record. I admit it. I like Kiss Dynasty. Sorry, Kiss Goes Disco, man. I Was Made for Loving You. Great cover, though, of 2000, man, by the way. The Rolling Stones song. Ace Frehley does that. Kicks ass. The Kinks are still in their great Arista period that I just love, love, love. So Low Budget from the Kinks. Michael Jackson, I think, puts out his first great record in my view. Off the Wall, of course. I love Michael Jackson there. Oops. I just knocked the mic over a little bit. Yeah, I mean, what? Don't Stop Till You Get Enough, Rock With Me. Off the Wall is a great song. Yeah. Did a video on ZZ Top, so Deguayo, a favorite of many people. If you look at a lot of people where they're talking ZZ Top, this was not my number one, but I mean, it is awesome. Love Talking Heads, Fear of Music. They were on our poll fairly recently, but the Police beat them out. But We'll do a Talking Heads video at some point. Here's a great debut. Love this band. This is one of those bands that was huge in the UK, kind of a one-hit wonder type in the US. But man, they're a great band. Madness. One step beyond. All right, that's great. I gushed last year over Devo's debut, their second record, Duty Now for the Future. Starting to bring some synthesizers in there, but this is still really interesting and cool. Yeah, some good stuff on here. I really like their cover of Secret Agent Man. I think that's cool. Another band that we did a video on. This is probably their most underrated, forgotten record. I really dig it. Dire Straits, Communique. You want to hear great Mark Knopfler guitar playing? That guitar play, that solo at the end of Lady Writer. Oh, awesome. David Bowie continues to be brilliant. Lodger, the third record in the Berlin trilogy, although I think it's actually a bit different than Heroes and Low, but brilliant nonetheless. We did a Bowie week. Go check that out. Hey, we did a video on these guys too. Got to mention Pink Floyd's The Wall. Now, in that video, I did say I am one of those people who thinks this is a bit bloated and not their greatest work. I think there is an absolute genius single record in here. But yeah, go watch the video and we can talk about that. UFO put Strangers in the Night. Yeah, Strangers in the Night. One of the great double live albums. Just killer start to finish. Another really creative dude that I think is kind of underrated a bit. Joe Jackson. Joe Jackson. Another angry young man at that point, along with Elvis Costello and Graham Parker, right? Joe Jackson would definitely go in a different direction a little bit later. But look sharp. Look sharp. Yeah, Is She Really Going Out With Him? Great song is on here. Sunday Papers, Look Sharp. Yeah, that's great. Still in that kind of middle period of journey with Evolution. Honestly, I don't know. Either this or we already talked about previous year, or Infinity, I think, is their best record from this period. Awesome. And finally, wouldn't be complete without mentioning AC/DC's Highway to Hell. The final record with Bon Scott before he left this earth. Man, it's a lot. So, hey, in the comments, what did I leave out? What did I get wrong? Let's talk 79. I look forward to it. We'll see you guys next time on Amity Tracks.